Welcome to Growing a B2B SaaS. On this show, you'll get actionable and usable advice. You'll hear about all aspects of growing a business to a business software company. Customer success, sales, funding, bootstrapping, exits, scaling, everything you need to know about growing a startup. And you'll get it from someone who's going through the same journey. Now your host, Joran Hofman.
Welcome back to the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast, where we discuss all topics on how to grow your B2B SaaS, no matter in which stage you're in. We already discussed how to sell your B2B SaaS with Thomas Small in season 2, but getting to that point, it will take time and it can be done in many different ways. Today, for me, it's going to be a great episode where I'll probably learn a lot myself, because we're going to discuss how to bootstrap your SaaS towards a 10 million plus exit. We're going to chat with Andrew Gazdecki, the founder and CEO of Acquire.com. So far, his company helped over hundreds of startups getting acquired and facilitated over 500 million in closed deals. Actually running Acquire, Andrew is an advisor to multiple startups and a great inspiration to his 80K followers, where I'm one of them on LinkedIn, as he shares a lot of content for Bootstrap founders. So I guess without further ado, welcome to the show, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I like to always start with this question. It's really Dutch and blunt. Why should people listen to you today?
That's an interesting question. I would say, if anything, I hope to teach someone something, but more importantly, inspire someone.
That's a good point of view. Let's dive right in. We're going to talk about bootstrapping. Let's start with the real basics. What does bootstrapping mean in your words?
Yeah, I think the straight answer to that would just be not raising a bunch of capital to build your business and building your business a little bit more intentionally at your own pace, where you control how fast you grow. Bootstrapping, to me, it means controlling your own destiny in terms of what you really want out of a startup. Do you want flexibility and free time? Do you want to just have nice lifestyle business, but also it's still possible to build a larger business? So I think bootstrapping it's a company that's not funded with a lot of outside capital, but you can build great businesses, but it gives you so much more optionality than if you do take on capital.
There's a big difference, right, with raising capital or not. I think bootstrap companies will have a bit more challenge, I guess, especially in early days. What do you think are some key techniques or key processes or strategies or things bootstrap companies do which are pivotal for success?
Yeah, I got two right off the top of my head. So first, you need to figure out what I call an unfair distribution model. One, because you can't build a big outbound sales team. You can't spend a bunch on ads or something like that. So you need to find a really cost-effective way to get your product in the hands of customers. I can give you examples of how I've done it, if that's helpful. And then the second one would be customer payback period. So what that means is it's a metric that you want to track, where what is the cost to acquire the customer, and then how much time does it take you to see an ROI on that? So typically in a venture-backed business, you have the luxury, you have a bunch of money in the bank. So you can sign up a customer at $100 a month and then wait 2 years until you're finally profitable, because let's assume it costs $2,000 to acquire that customer. After 2 years, you're finally profitable with that customer if they don't churn. At a bootstrap startup, you need that time to be ideally less than 60 days. I would recommend 30 days. So that's a metric that I would always track when I was bootstrapping my first company. To give some more examples, so unfair distribution strategies, what could those be? That could be social, that could be storytelling, that could be positioning, that could be niching down into a specific market. For me, it was actually white labeling and partnerships. So we didn't have a huge sales team, but what we did was we partnered with other companies that had huge sales teams. And so we would basically brand the product to their company so they can have their sales team sell it. And that created an unfair distribution channel. And then also the unit economics on that allowed us to have a customer payback period of about like 28 days. So when someone would subscribe, typical pricing was around, let's call it $300 to $500 a month, or $3,000 to $1,000. This might be like too much detail, but those two are just critically important, is understanding you need to find a cost-effective way to acquire customers. And then two, customer payback period really will determine how fast you can scale the business by reinvesting revenue back into growth.
Yeah, with the first advice, you already say use somebody who has access to the ideal customer profile, basically, who has access to it, and then leverage their network and have them actually sell it for you.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a story about that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, for context, now I run a marketplace, acquire.com, and really the genesis behind that is I bootstrapped a SaaS startup, 10 million in revenue, and it was acquired by a private equity firm. And that's the outcomes that we're trying to help founders achieve, just that same sort of outcome. Now, when it comes to the distribution model, like how do we get to 10 million in revenue without any capital raise? And I should say we did raise 100K, so 2 small angel investors. What we did was we started cold calling small businesses to sell mobile apps. This is in 2010. And so we would cold call restaurants. And I remember even being on calls and saying, I didn't have a lot of sales experience. So I'm asking, hey, what's your mobile app strategy? And they'd be like, what? Appetizer? Do you want our appetizer? What are you talking about? Selling to small businesses direct over cold calling just didn't work. And a huge inflection point for us in the company was, maybe this is another piece of advice too, is just listen to your customers because they can change everything. So there was a customer that we had in Switzerland that started making apps for these large hotels. And I assumed that he owned the hotels. And so I reached out just to say thank you and maybe see if he had any advice. But what he told me was he actually owned a marketing agency and he managed their social, their website, pretty much all the marketing for these hotels. And then I asked him how many customers he had. And he said 200. And then my next question was, how the hell do I get you to sell apps to all those customers? And so he was actually the person that said, if you white label this mobile app platform, because what I'm doing now is I'm selling the app, but I'll charge $500 to set it up and then $50 a month to maintain it. And then I pay you $30 a month. But on your website, my customers can see that price delta. If I could just have my own branding, I can have $1,000 setup fee and $100 monthly management fee. And so I remember asking him, we could build that. Will you pre-subscribe to 50 apps up front? And he was like, yep. And so that's when we changed from selling one app at a time to sometimes 10, 20, 30, 100 at a time.
Yeah. And in the end, to come back to what you said at the beginning, talk to your customers, listen to your customers. So you had one customer, you went in the conversation, and that's where the magic started.
Yeah, I literally had to Wikipedia white label. I didn't know what it meant or anything. And that ended up being our business model because it was so cost effective, because it allowed us to, again, work with other people with pre-existing relationships with small businesses. And that's crucial when you sell to SMBs, because there's a saying that small businesses lack time, aptitude, and money, which is a perfect storm. They don't have the time to learn anything new. They don't want to learn anything new. And then they don't have a big marketing budget. And so they rely heavily on whoever is they're currently working with. So we were able to tap into that and get directly to the owner of the business without having to build out a massive sales team and hunt down the owner of the business and sell it to him. So we had, I guess, warm referrals into hundreds of thousands of small businesses.
Nice. And this is like a real good success story. When we go to the other side, especially now with Acquire, like what do you see other founders make as mistakes while trying to grow and sell their company? What are the most common mistakes you see them making?
Yeah, there's a few. I think it depends on what category, like product, marketing, sales. In terms of product, I think a lot of entrepreneurs over-engineer their products. And so what you'll typically see with a lot of businesses is 20% of the features are mainly being used. Then you have all these other nice to have 80% features. So that's one common mistake. And then another one would be in terms of marketing, not being really specific in terms of how you position your business. Who is it for? What problem do you solve? And why should I care? Like just have like lots of buzzwords that doesn't make sense. Just speak in clear language. So simple that like the Mom Test is a good book. And then in terms of sales, shying away from sales, I think is a big one. And I see a lot of founders trying to hire someone to figure out sales, but it's your job as a founder to figure out the initial sales process, because that does two things. It gets you really close to the customer, and then it helps you understand the sales process. So when you do go to hire someone to eventually take over sales or an additional sales rep, you're able to understand what type of person you need in that role.
Yeah, and I guess for listeners, this has been the advice of season 1 for, I think, like almost everybody. Talk to your customers, do sales yourself, get your first clients in, and then you can figure out how to move things forward. I think this is one of the most common mistakes, where not doing sales yourself is a really big one. You help startups to sell their company, right? You had some big exits you helped startups to get a big exit. Can you share some of the success stories? You don't have to name names if you don't want to, but more as in, like, what are some success stories? How did they get there? And in the end, like, how did they actually get that 10 million plus exit?
Yeah. So for context, our sweet spot is generally 7-figure acquisitions. We've only done a few 8-figure acquisitions. So our ideal customer profile would be a SaaS company doing anywhere from, let's call it 3 to 5 million in revenue, ideally profitable, in a SaaS company. But if you do have a bigger company, we can definitely help you sell it. But a couple stories. Recently, we had an acquisition that it was a SaaS business based in Canada, and it helped other companies with their sales process. That business, what was cool about it was when multi-million-dollar acquisitions happen, you truly change people's lives. I know that sounds cheesy, but I went to lunch with him and he told me, he had went to 2 other brokers or 3 other brokers, and they valued his business at half of what we sold his business for, and at a third of the price that other brokers would normally charge. So that was rewarding to hear. And then just like a big hug, because like it's emotional and stressful. And when we actually have those success stories, like we also feel it too and get to celebrate with them. Another story I like to share is we do acquisitions globally as well. So we're not just US based. I love also the smaller acquisitions too. So the one I just described was on the upper end of high 7 figures. But we'll see a lot of situations like, I love telling this story. There was a 20-something-year-old in India who built a platform to help you pass coding exams for large software companies, and he sold it for $500,000 or something like that. And he wrote me the most heartfelt email. He bought his mom a house, he paid off his school, and $500,000 in other regions of the world goes a long ways. Another story that I really love is someone who was living in Bali sold a business for about a couple $100,000. And he told me that was 10 years of just living expenses in Bali, living in paradise. So we hear a lot of the stories like that about how whether you have a large startup or small startup, we have buyers for all of those. I could keep going with the story, but the general theme is when those acquisitions close, it's not just a business and okay, whatever. There's someone behind it with a story, with a life, with a family, and then we get to actually really have a meaningful impact on them that they're never going to forget in their entire lives, and really help them achieve something that they could never do without us.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine it's a stressful period for them and for yourself, so you want to make it as smooth as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. When you go to sell a business, you have no idea like what to expect, what the process is like, how to properly price your business, how to prepare for the acquisition, how to speak with buyers. And that's really what we're addressing at Acquire.com.
Yeah, I'm curious because at the beginning you said the one example you mentioned, you valued the different 10 other firms. I guess I mentioned they're M&A firms. And you now mentioned as well, pricing your business is something difficult, right? I guess like, how do you look at that? Is it purely ARR? Do you look at other metrics? Of course, profitability you already mentioned.
Yeah, good question. It depends on the business, but typically we'll put a valuation, like we'll give a suggested valuation. But the key to getting a higher valuation is you want to speak to multiple buyers. There's a saying, if you have one buyer, you have no buyers. Yep. And so what we do the best at Acquire.com, or what I think we do the best, is we drive a tremendous amount of buyer interest. And it's not just regular people. It's private equity firms, it's public companies, it's family offices, it's high net worth, like real serious buyers, like something I wish I had, because it took me 3 years to find a buyer once we started searching. So what we're able to do is take a company, and this is what drives the price up, is the more interested parties we get into acquisition process, you'll get multiple offers. And then from there, you can essentially ideally start a bidding war where people are, and also it's important to note, the highest price always isn't the best option, because once you sign a letter of intent, which is a formal offer to sell your business, that's not guaranteed to close. We do see sometimes where someone signs an LOI, the buyer changes their mind at the last minute. It happens. So we also help founders review letter of intents or do due diligence on buyers. So when they do sign an LOI, we increase the likelihood of that LOI closing. But short answer to your question, just the amount of liquidity within the marketplace and the attention we drive to these businesses is what really helps them sell. Because if you just show it to 10 buyers, 8 aren't going to be interested. And if you just have 2, maybe 1 gives you an offer, and then they know they have all the leverage and they can take you through due diligence, change the price like towards the end, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, because I guess there will be fun stuff in the process, like things you can't predict or things you wouldn't think would happen are going to happen.
Yeah, I would say the most important part of an acquisition to successfully close is goodwill, because there's really trust on both sides, and you got to meet in the middle, where a buyer is going to be doing due diligence on your business, and as the owner of the business, some of that can seem intrusive or some of it can seem exhausting, because it's essentially like telling your significant other everything you've ever done wrong in your life. You go through customer contracts, you go through code reviews, you show them how the operations of your business works, because you have that knowledge. And once you sell the business to them, they're going to be operating the business unless you stay on through a transition period or earn out or something like that. So yeah, we help with each step of those stages in terms of just reducing stress and letting founders know you're not on your own. Like, we've seen a lot of acquisitions, both good and bad. So we know how to steer it more towards a successful, good acquisition.
And I think then a question for the SaaS founders, what can they do to make it a good acquisition, I guess also, and then this is like for subjective, but with a good valuation, like what should founders have in place to do so? We can think about metrics, we can think about documentation, anything here.
Yeah, it all helps. The short, easy cop-out answer is just build a great business. If you build a great business, you can get away with a lot. And what I mean by that is you can get away with, I don't recommend it, less preparation. If you have negative churn, your net retention rate is high, you're growing like crazy, you're also profitable, those businesses will generally get offers without any sort of preparation. But if you do prepare, that'll just accelerate offers. So in terms of how founders can really prepare for an acquisition is start getting your books in order, start having a clean 3-year P&L broken down by month. That's extremely important. That's usually the first question that financial buyer will ask. And also just when you work with our team, just taking our advice. How do you speak to buyers? What materials should you have available? How do you introduce yourself? How should you position your listing? Also aligning, how are we going to market? Who are you trying to sell to? Because we have a database of so many buyers with data on what they're looking to acquire, so we can properly connect buyers and sellers with the right people. So again, a deal actually happens and we're not just sending a bunch of random people that are not interested in your type of business. But for me, what I did was kept the data room open. I would just record looms on how does marketing work. It can be really simple to start just to get buyer interest. But your goal as you think about potentially selling your business is make it really easy for the buyer to understand your business, like in every department. So a 360-degree view, and also do an audit on yourself too. Do I have documentation for sales or marketing or the product? If you don't, even just a quick loom can help, or a recorded video. But the sooner you do that, the better, because another easy strategy is giving buyers access to a light data room that just has high level information where it's not super sensitive, and you save kind of the more sensitive questions for formal due diligence after you've signed a letter of intent. But just having that data room shows professionalism. It shows you're taking the process seriously. And that's what buyers really want to see. Is they don't want to debate on, is your business worth 20 times revenue? No, they don't. They don't have time for that. Some do, and some situations buyers will. So having a realistic valuation, being prepared in terms of understanding what buyers are going to ask up front, and just be ready to really put effort into the acquisition, because it does take time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things come back to what you already said before, as in build a great business. Because if you have a great business, you probably have internal documentation already. You probably have low churn. You might already have some kind of a version of analytics yourself. So it's easier to share with the buyers.
Absolutely. Yeah, and other things you can do on, I don't want to shamelessly plug acquire.com, but you can connect, like if you don't have a clean P&L, you can connect QuickBooks or whatever billing system you use, Stripe, ChargeBeat, Curly, whatever, Braintree, whatever it may be. And we can build out a P&L for you. So giving buyers a true financial look into the health of your business. And that really just, again, creates trust and helps buyers understand. And you're not sharing like your customer list and that sensitive information. How much revenue have you generated in last year? What does profitability look like? What's growth rate? What's average revenue per account? Just really, instead of just stating it, we have tools that connect directly in your billing system so you can show them, like giving read access into Google Analytics as an example.
Yeah, I haven't personally used you guys yet, but I know like these tools work great because you can just connect the sources, and then from there you also can really say like we connected like our data source, so we can't iterate it, and it's just you do all the math for you basically. It saves you a lot of time to get things in order.
Yeah, that was one thing we noticed was a lot of SaaS founders don't have clean P&Ls. We actually built a P&L builder. So when you list with us, again, it's like one of the first questions that a buyer is going to ask, because they want to understand, how are you generating revenue? Where are your expenses coming from? Is the business in decline? Is it growing? Is it profitable? Is it break even? Like, what's going on in the business? And you can tell so much from a financial snapshot. We created a tool that breaks that out into a 36-month P&L just by connecting metrics.
Growing a B2B SaaS is tough. We know. This is why we started Reditus. We help you to grow your monthly recurring revenue without high upfront costs. How? By leveraging someone else's network and only giving away a commission when they deliver you a paid client. It's called affiliate marketing. It's already a really cost-effective and scalable revenue channel. We even made it better for you. With Reditus, you can start for free and only start paying us when you generate revenue. Learn more at www.getreditus.com.
When we go back to bootstrapping, what do you think are some unique challenges bootstrap companies will have, and how can they navigate those?
Everything. I always joke bootstrapping is playing startup on the hardest mode possible, because you can't really take too many risks, like as a counterexample. So I bootstrap business apps. Acquire.com is venture backed. And what we're able to do since we raised capital is we're able to take some bets that may not work out. And we've had that happen. As a bootstrap company, you cannot. And so bootstrap companies are forced to be efficient with every single dollar that they have. And every business should really operate in that manner, and we do our best to operate with that same. Once you bootstrap a company, it's hard to really ever think of building a company another way. But when I was bootstrapping my previous startup, there were so many situations where we had a saying, we only hire when it hurts. And so there's moments where you're growing and you're putting the team on. If you are successfully growing fast, but you can't afford an additional hire for, as an example, we had at one point 6, 7, 8 people just manually uploading iOS apps all day. And we needed like 10 or 12 people given the volume. We ended up automating that process, but you just can't afford to just build out the team that you really need to go from 5 to 10 million within the first 2 years. So you have to do all the sales calls yourself. You have to figure out the marketing strategy. You got to figure out the product strategy. You don't have the luxury of building a modern tech stack with HubSpot and SalesLoft and a ton of different, like a nice dialer and stuff like that. You probably also can't get an office. Not necessarily you need one, but there's just so many things that you have to work to obtain. But what that does is it builds a culture of just pure grit and determination, because you can't buy your way out of problems. You have to find creative solutions. So I always say, I guess put another way, the way I think about it is those challenges are also blessings in disguise, because they force you to build a company properly without any sort of waste because you don't have the capital to waste.
Yeah, can fully relate to this. I always have fun challenges with events, for example, high ticket prices. I always manage to go one way or another, but without paying like the full ticket price or getting access to somebody's network, for example, by doing this podcast where we are getting our brand out there one way or another, but without spending a lot of money on it.
Yeah, that's creative marketing, creative business building strategies, and it's required. You just don't have the luxury of hiring a VP sales or a VP of marketing to come figure it out. And then also, even if you do, that rarely works out. You need to really understand every aspect of your business. And I call it like years of just chewing glass, where you got to do everything from customer support. Another example is in the first 2 years of Acquire, we were entirely bootstrapped. So I bootstrapped this company to about $1 million. And the way we started was I was doing all customer support, all product management. We have a curated marketplace. So when listings come in, we review them. We do some due diligence on them before placing them on the market. We'll also clean up the listing page. So we do a lot. It's not just sign up and, okay, whatever you said. And then writing a newsletter that we have daily that sends our top picks of new deals. There's so many things that I was doing. I don't recommend it, but I was truly working 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. for about 2 years. A little footnote there too is it was during COVID. There's nothing to do, and I love business. So I guess maybe another kind of piece of advice for people thinking about business is during that period, you might be thinking that's absolutely insane, but it didn't feel like work. It was just like I was playing my favorite video game all day long. And so that's, I think, where you can win also as a bootstrapper is find a market that you deeply understand and that you're deeply passionate about, because it will get hard and you will want to quit. And then when that happens, just remember that's when people do typically quit. So don't do that. But you dramatically increase your odds of success by what I'd call founder market fit. Why are you specifically, do you have any sort of advantage or unique insight into the market? And then ideally serve a customer that you truly are passionate about or solve a problem that you're truly passionate about solving. Otherwise, you'll just quit. We see it all the time.
In the end, 9 out of 10 startups fail. So you have to have that determination to actually keep things going for yourself as well.
Yeah, I say 90% of startups fail and then 10% of entrepreneurs just don't quit. There's always a way. I think sometimes, yes, there's just no product market fit or something like that. But from my experience, the startups that really make it, and also just defining success is important too. Like I think building $1 billion business is a silly goal. The odds are like you have 0.1% chance, but give it your best and try as much as possible and realize that every problem has a solution. So whatever problem your startup is facing, someone before you has already solved that problem. And you should be grateful for that, because back in 2010, that was the year I started Business Apps. For short, everyone called it Biz Apps. We ended up having to buy that domain because once my mom started calling it Biz Apps, I was like, okay, all right, okay. Even my mom can't get my company name right. Work on something that you're truly passionate about, and you'll have a competitive advantage over others in the market.
Yeah, and I think the two things you said, set up realistic expectations. You're not going to build a $1 billion company, but also the examples you gave before, like with a couple of billions, with even a couple 100,000, you can change your life already.
One thing that I truly believe is success is really defined by you. Like, it's such a cheesy saying, but it's true. When you think about building a SaaS company, and I was actually just talking to a friend last night about this, he was thinking about, okay, how do I go from 0 to like 100 million? I don't think I'm thinking, and I just said, hey, slow down. Let's talk about how you get from 0 to 100K. And then let's talk about how you get from 100K to $1 million. And don't think about anything else until you hit those milestones. So also just thinking things like, you're always going to see a startup growing faster than you. You're always going to see a startup that's bigger, or I don't know, however you define that. But having a business where if your goal is to just make $250,000 a year, that is so obtainable with the internet today. And that's an awesome goal too. You don't have to go big to be successful, is the point I think I was trying to make.
Yeah, because in the end, you define your own success.
Exactly.
When we go back to valuations, like I'm not going to ask again about multipliers, things like that, but there's a lot of things going on in the SaaS world now. Like, how do you see the future valuations based on what is happening currently in the market?
Valuations are constantly changing. Right now, we're seeing SaaS companies typically trade at 3 to 4 times revenue or 4 to 7 times profit. And most SaaS companies that we help sell are typically valued on profitability. So the profitability, like on our marketplace as a specific example, profitable startups receive, I believe, 10 times the amount of buyer requests and NDAs signed than non-profitable startups. And that's where you'll get a valuation on profitability, where you're running a business at, let's say it's at $1 million in revenue, but your profitability is at $600K. Having a multiple on that $600K is very significant because you have amazing margins. You have a very lean and efficient team, and that is a fantastic acquisition for both parties involved. There's a large buyer pool for those types of businesses. So if you had a goal as a founder where your goal is to just become financially secure, that's what you should be thinking about doing, in my opinion, because it's such a more practical and realistic approach. Unless you want to change the world, again, going back to write down what you want out of a startup, and if it's just to become financially secure, I say bootstrap to create wealth, raise venture capital to disrupt or change a market. Because when you bootstrap a company, if you get it to just 1 million in revenue, it's profitable. You can be a huge success with an acquisition. If you raise venture capital and you get to 1 million in revenue and a couple 100,000 in profit, no one's going to be too happy with that. So just understanding, what do you really want out of a startup? I think if people were really honest with themselves, they're just trying to make a better lives for their family. And that's where I think not raising outside capital makes a lot of sense for a lot of different entrepreneurs.
Yeah, because in the end, you're going to come into that treadmill and then everybody wants their multiplier, of course. So you're going to go from funding round to funding round, basically.
Yeah, if you get on the fundraising treadmill too, but there's ways to also build businesses. Like we saw a good example with like some of those iconic companies, surprisingly, also never raised a lot of venture capital. So also something that you could do is raise, say, a small seed round to just get the product going, build a sustainable business. Trust me, like most investors will be thrilled with a 5 or 10x return, or even like a 1 or 2 or 3x return, because most investments go to 0. So if you can't build a startup without some form of capital, which I always think you can find a way or find excuses in entrepreneurship. But if you're truly in a situation where maybe a little bit of seed money will help you get at least an MVP out or something like that, or give you time to build it on the side, whatever it may be, that could also be a good option too, where you're not raising 100 million, trying to go public. You're just trying to build a sustainable business. But the beauty in that approach as well is you can decide to go big later. I think the biggest mistake that I see when founders look to finance their company is they think it's make a pitch deck. This is the problem. We're going to disrupt something huge, but you haven't really done anything yet. And then the first step is talking to investors, when it should be the complete opposite. You should be building the product. You should be talking to customers. You should be ideally getting revenue and really figuring out the business. And then if you get to $1 million revenue, you can take a little pit stop and say, where do I want to take this thing? Do I want to try and go bigger, or do I like how the business is now? Because your ambitions also may change as you grow the business over a period of time. And that's the best approach as well, because it keeps your options open. And that's something that I think every entrepreneur should do.
Yeah. Nice. Really good advice. We are coming to the end, where I always like to ask these 2 questions. We're going to chop it up into different sections, as you mentioned to your friend. So when we talk about advice, what kind of advice would you give SaaS founders growing to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
To 10K monthly recurring revenue, I would say if you have no idea how to market your business, just start building in public. You'll find customers, you'll build your brand, you'll have people cheering you on. It keeps you accountable. You'll get instant feedback. There's so many benefits to it. You'll definitely get copied though, but don't worry about that. I always say if you're not being copied, try harder, because people don't copy bad products, but that would be my best advice.
Nice. Yeah. That's also funny indeed. You get copied, but in the end, you're hopefully doing better than the other. When we take it one step further, so we're past 10K monthly recurring revenue, what kind of advice would you give somebody growing to, it's a big step, to 10 million ARR?
Start hiring people smarter than you as soon as you can afford them. That was probably my biggest mistake at business apps personally. And the first thing I did when we started getting to a point at Acquire where I can hire people that, I had previously worked with that are far smarter than me to take over certain departments. That was the first thing I did. So get out of customer support. You always want to have a pulse on your customers forever, but you don't need to be sitting on live chat forever. Like, you need to work on the business, not in the business. And that's a critical shift that I think a lot of founders don't really understand in terms of how impactful, like how much faster you can grow if you build a team. Startups, in my opinion, are a team sport. And so to do that, you need to pull yourself out of departments and be a selector of leaders to take over customer support, to take over marketing, to take over sales, to take over product management, because that way you're building a business rather than just a really highly demanding 100-hour-a-week job.
Makes a lot of sense. The final question, any last pieces of advice or encouragement to other SaaS founders who are currently bootstrapping?
Yeah, I would say just in terms of building startups, just understand it's hard. Learn to love it when it sucks, because every founder goes through hard times. Every founder bumps into mistakes. Every founder has stories of things that they wish they did differently. It's just part of the game. So just learn to love it when it sucks and keep building and keep going.
Nice. And there are communities, a lot of communities out there where you can meet other SaaS founders and you can vent sometimes as well and talk about your frustrations with no judgment. Cool. Thanks for coming on to the show, Andrew, and sharing your knowledge. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening to Growing a B2B SaaS. Joran has been ahead of customer success before founding his own startup. He's experiencing the same journey you are. We hope you've gotten some actionable advice from the show. And we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to like, rate, and review the podcast in the meantime. To find out more and to hook up with us on our social media sites, go to www.getredditous.com. See you next time on Growing a B2B SaaS.